CGI has become an unbeatable tool in modern filmmaking to create, fantastical worlds, breathtaking landscapes, and incredible creatures that would be impossible to achieve with practical effects alone. However, despite its many benefits, CGI is not a foolproof solution. Actually, many directors from classic movies like Star Wars, Spider-Man, and Justice League regret the CGI in their movies. This 1999 film relied heavily on CGI to create its titular character, a reanimated corpse with supernatural powers. Unfortunately, the CGI used to create the character was definitely not up to par, and the result was a stiff and unconvincing monster that failed to impress audiences. Director Stephen Spielberg talked about his over-reliance on CGI in the film, saying that he wishes he'd used more practical effects instead. George Lucas, the mastermind behind the Star Wars franchise, famously used CGI in the prequel trilogy, creating entire worlds and armies of digital creatures. However, many fans felt that the CGI in the prequels was overdone and detracted from the film's storytelling and emotional impact. George Lucas has since been pretty vocal about the fact that he wishes he used more practical effects, emphasizing the importance of grounding the films in a sense of reality. Justice League was heavily criticized for its overuse of CGI, particularly in the scenes focused on the villainous Steppenwolf. The character was entirely created using CGI, and the result was a poorly rendered and unconvincing villain that failed to intimidate audiences. The director, Zack Snyder, has since stated that he wishes he used a more practical approach to the character, even bringing it down to a physical actor in a motion capture suit. One of the most common issues with bad CGI in movies is that it can detract from the emotional impact of a scene. When audiences are faced with poorly rendered CGI, they are less likely to become emotionally invested in the story and characters. This was the case with the 2002 film Spider-Man. In particular, the scene when the Green Goblin attacks a parade, and it didn't go over well with the audience. Director Sam Raimi has since expressed regret over his use of CGI in the film, saying that he wishes the film had a more grounded and realistic feel. Bad CGI movies can also date a film very quickly, because the technology is obviously constantly evolving, and what looks cutting edge today may look laughably outdated in just a couple of years. Let's talk about the 1997 film Spawn, which relied heavily on CGI to create its demonic creatures. The film's CGI effects were groundbreaking at the time, but they were soon considered pretty cheesy looking. Director Mark A.Z. Dippé later said he thinks using practical effects would have given it a much more timeless quality. Let's be real. Stephen Spielberg has very few movies to talk badly about, but according to him, there is something in Close Encounters of the Third Kind that he really wishes he'd cut. One of the coolest things about the movie is the aliens. They're pretty ambiguous for the majority of the film, and it wasn't really until the end that they were really seen, at all. There's one scene in particular where Stephen Spielberg shoots inside the mothership, going through the entirety of its interior. He actually hated that he did that because he thought it ruined the allure of the aliens. He actually ended up cutting it from the theatrical release. As far as CGI is concerned, this movie was filmed before it was a huge thing in the industry, but they did do some stellar special effects artistry inside the mothership. Again, this was a major bummer to Spielberg. He hated using all the special effects and wished he'd cut it from the movie entirely. It's really hard to top the original film, as it truly set the bar for both digital and practical effects. Unfortunately, Matrix Reloaded didn't quite live up to the expectation the first one set. The CGI didn't really hold up, and the fact that it was heavily relied on makes it a bit worse. In particular, the fight scene between Neo and Agent Smith looks like something pulled from a 90s computer screen, and the car-hopping highway chase scene doesn't redeem it very much. The practical stunts and effects were pretty incredible, especially for the time, but the excessive use of CGI definitely makes for a disaster and disappointing sequel. Needless to say, fans were definitely disappointed. Here's one that's actually pretty insane. A movie that was done completely with practical effects only to be replaced in entirety with CGI. And awful CGI at that. The original movie from 1982 is known as one of the best examples of sci-fi and horror to this day. Unfortunately, the 2011 film of The Thing is in no way comparable to its predecessor. A ton of people who worked on the film, when it was done with practical effects, were pretty upset at the shift to CGI, and have major regrets about that decision. I I mean, it's not a totally unwatchable film, but the monster effects were definitely a major downgrade. Despite its many pitfalls, CGI remains a valuable tool in the filmmaker's toolbox, when used sparingly and in service of the story. It can create incredible worlds and creatures that would be impossible to achieve with practical effects alone. Unfortunately though, when filmmakers rely too heavily on it, it can have a detrimental effect on the final product. Just ask the Green Goblin at the parade. What scenes do you think should have been included in the list?